Off may be an older game, but it's one of the most well-known and interesting RPG Maker games. Today on the Panopticon Theatre, we're going to explore the game and some theories about what is actually going on in the story. Off was released in 2008 by Belgian dev Mortis Ghost, and then translated to English in 2011. Created using the RPG Maker 2003 software, the same used to create similarly praised and equally unusual Yume Nikki, Off is considered one of the hallmark classic RPG Maker games. It's even been cited as an inspiration for Undertale. The game's unusual and unique style and bizarre but intriguing story won it a great deal of praise in the online community, particularly with its Tumblr fandom being the 6th most reblogged game in 2013. Although it functions in general as a standard RPG, Off is clearly a little different in its manner. For example, instead of the normal fire, ice, etc. elements that other games feature, the elements in Off are smoke, plastic, metal, sugar, and meat. It also features an unusual number of puzzles for a game of its style. First, let's go through the game as it's played through so we know what we're looking at. It is highly recommended you experience the game yourself first. If you want to skip directly to the analysis, go to this timestamp. Upon first starting the game, the player is prompted to enter their name. This name is not given to the controlled character. This guy already has a name, or at least a moniker. This is the Batter, a stoic-seeming monochrome man in a baseball uniform, and we'll be piloting him throughout the game. The first character we meet is a fellow called the Judge, a feline with a wide Cheshire Cat grin. Immediately this cat addresses us, the player, referring to us as the Batter's puppeteer, though the Batter states that we can't respond. It seems that both these characters are not only aware of our control, but expecting it. The Batter states that he's been assigned to a sacred mission, and we're expected to help complete it. A mission to purify the world. We're given a simple introduction to the game's mechanics, then sent on our way to Zone 1. Zone 1 is where we first start to see the strange lore of this world unfurl. We're introduced to the timid and neurotic Elson, the most common inhabitants of this world. We travel through the smoke mines of Damien, where the Elson dig up smoke to be bottled and sent to other zones, or released into the air to be breathed. We discover our first add-on, a white circular ring that aids in battle. Then, to the farms in Pentel, we learn how metals are mined from cows. All these weird and unnatural ideas to us are stated by the characters in game so simply and as a matter of course that it never comes off as weird for the sake of weird, more so that the world simply is the way it is. It's bizarre and a little off-putting, creating this almost dreamlike feeling, like you're a waking thought traveling through a world of dream logic. Continuing through this zone, you encounter Dedan, a toothy guy who seems to run this area. The Batter refers to him as a spectre and considers him hostile, saying that he must destroy him. We then reach Shachihata, the area of plastic administration where forms are filled out in return for plastic. After fighting through here, eventually you reach Alma, home of the meat fountains. Each time an element, smoke, metal, plastic, and meat has been mentioned, it has been referred to as the first of the 4 elements. Traveling through this zone, you encounter Bernd, Elson whose heads have exploded off their bodies, and whom the Batter now engages in battle. It seems that the Elson may become like this due to stress. At the end of Alma, you finally fight Dedan. Apparently defeating the bosses of each zone is what's required to purify them, as well as fighting off the spectres. Batter declares the area purified, and then we see a small scene of a red room in which sits a little child who coughs as he declares that this didn't start well. Zone 2 contains the Bismarck Library. This contains some readable books with lore, although it's quite confusing to place. After solving a puzzle, you can access the higher floors of the library and meet a white cat who introduces himself as Japhet. Japhet says he's the creator of the city and also the leader of the Spectres, claiming the Queen, who's been mentioned a few times before, sent them to him to restore justice to the zone. However, they do not come when he calls during the battle and then flees. We gain a new add-on, Omega. Coming back down, the judge greets us and tells us to head to the shopping mall. Allegedly, it's quite Spectre-haunted. Heading in, we see a fellow we've seen a couple times before now, Zachary, a man in a frog-like mask. He's the shopkeeper of the game. He's popped up a couple times. He seems vaguely aware of the meta level of the game. We'll come back to him in a bit when we talk about specific characters in more depth. Traversing through the maze of the shopping mall, we encounter the judge again, who tells us he's looking for his brother who apparently lives in this area, Valerie. We've certainly seen another white cat, but that was Japhet, right? Anyway, we find a summon point for a pedalo here, allowing us access to the next area, the amusement park. Throughout Zone 2, we've seen the elves in here express a strong fear of danger and potentially dangerous activities, and it's very clearly shown here. All the activities at the park are extremely safe, although they still excite and scare the Elsen. Here, to access the boss's office, we need to prove we know him. To do this, we have to go on the old roller coaster, which was apparently shut down before ever opening, although an Elsen still mans the gate for some reason. Going to the top, we find a statue of our merchant friend Zachary and discover he's the boss of this park. Pushing the statue onto the coaster, we get a photo with the statue, which is enough to let us into the office. In here we find a bunch of orbs that increase stats. We can also win a necktie from a balloon game. Using the necktie, we then enter the residential area. Japhet is here, and he sets spectres upon the residents here who don't acknowledge him. After we purify this area, the residents thank us, but confiscate our die and ask us to leave, as our bat is a dangerous object. The judge meets us outside and informs us that the cat we've been seeing is, in fact, his brother Valerie, who has apparently gone mad and is proclaiming to be both Japhet, or royal agent, and the leader of the Spectres. The judge disputes this and tells us that Valerie is on the roof of the library. When we get there, we find that Japhet/Valerie maintains this position. The judge asks him to leave his delusions and return to Zone 0, where he has a cellar where he claims that they can forget their sorrows. We'll get back to that cellar later. The real Japhet pops his head out of Valerie's mouth, announcing that he's taken control of Valerie. We now fight Japhet, and he emerges entirely from Valerie's body. Once he's defeated, we see another scene with the small child from before. He coughs and says, "The bird, he left too." You may return to the purified zones at any point from the nothingness, but this is the point that many players do, so let's explore them now. Upon returning to the zones previously purified, we find things change significantly. All color is washed from the world. Any normal BGM has been replaced with some extremely ominous music, full of whispers. Noises can be heard in the distance, banging and shouting. The shouting voice has been interpreted to be calling Usiko, or help in French. The song that plays here is called in the OST, Not Safe. No life remains here. Signs and text are rendered unreadable, and many areas are inaccessible. The only things you encounter are creatures called secretaries, strange baby-like creatures wearing luchador-type clothes. Their attacks all have math-related names, and they are some of the strongest enemies in the game, getting stronger as you go up in the zones. A few hidden items can be found in these zones, each relating to one of the elements. You can find the judge in Purified Zone 2 at the top of the library, meowing as loud as he can, searching for his deceased brother Valerie. I am meowing at the top of my lungs, pretending the echoes belong to someone I used to know. Have you seen my dear brother? A single Elsin can also be found hiding in a bunker in this purified zone. The ghosts are gone, the color is gone, everything's gone. I am now forever safe. Is this what purification means? The Bata seems to have no reaction to it. What is he really trying to achieve here? You can also return to Zone 0. Remember how the judge mentioned a basement? If you have the right item, you can find and enter a basement area and fight someone called Sugar. She's a strange one. She's also the strongest boss in the game, so her fight might take a while if you don't figure out that she's sensitive to poison. Zone 3, or Vesper, is home to an enormous factory. We learn that the fifth element, sugar, is produced here. We must navigate through the cafeteria. Past here we can find Zachary, whose mask has changed to a cat-like one, and he now meows when he talks. He claims to be the judge at first, but the Bata easily sees through this, and Zachary admits that he's going to replace the judge for a while he mourns. He also refers to the judge as Pablo. The two discuss the fact that the Elsen here are not afraid of the spectres, and Zachary tells the Bata to go to the treatment rooms, or Area 2, through the monorail. In the dorms, we see an Elsen being attacked and killed by spectres despite his claims that they're friendly. This also directly contradicts a poster in the other dorm saying, "If you do not attack the ghost, they will not attack you." Another Elsen says that the director claims spectres are nice. We also find our third add-on, Ypsilon, here. Taking the monorail, we arrive in Area 2. Zachary, who'd previously said that we should race here and he would give us a free item if we won, announces that he got here first, but also that it was scripted so we had no chance anyway. He gives us an item anyway and heads off to look around, although he says in one place where you can talk to him. Going to another building has him switch to his frog mask and retake his shopkeeper role. Moving through the factory, we can see the Elsen are a little tense. We see a group of them actively fighting off spectres in the sugar stores before attacking the Bata and becoming burnt. They seem to have an attachment to the sugar. Zachary tells us to go on to Area 3, as we're in a video game after all, and that's the next logical step. All the employees appear to be burnt now. In Area 3, we learn about how sugar is made, from burning corpses of the dead. The sugar is then fed to the employees. Without sugar, people could no longer bear reality, and they would go mad. We're told the director in Area 4 organizes this all. Meeting with Zachary at the monorail, he uses an access card to allow us into the next area. Whilst on the monorail, however, an obstruction on the track turns out to be a new type of burned. This guy doesn't even fight back. He just calls for help over and over as you kill him. Area 4 is loud and full of burned. We can solve a puzzle either with help from Zachary or directly from the game's readme file. Then we meet the boss of the zone, Enoch. He claims the phantoms are the souls of the dead, and that the factory is a wall against it. We can't beat him at first though, and we have to flee. He chases you down, exhausting himself enough that the Bata may defeat him. At the end of the battle, Enoch has this to say. "This zone, deprived of its guardian, is now destined to disappear, and the people who live here, whether they deserve it or not, to fall into nothingness without hope of return." This is the fate of all the purified zones, to fall into nothingness. Finally, with every zone purified, we can head into the room. On entry, it titles itself Chapter 5, and we begin to head in reverse order of chapters. In the small bedroom, the calendar reads February 11th. Upon leaving, the chairs will be arranged in a smile. Back in the room, text on the wall reads, "I don't like this place very much. It's a good thing Papa is here." Today we played together. He gave me a comic. He told me that I was ill, so I take pills. The batter will then have to fight off a horde of teddy bears. The chairs will now be in a sad face. Text on the wall now reads, "I don't like these pills." Batter travels through a crudely drawn hallway with equally crude spectres. The hallway will loop until the batter leaves the way he came. Papa said that we'll go outside to play tomorrow. The date on the calendar reads June 3rd. The wall reads, "The door is open." A scribbly map leads to 3 areas, where each of the guardians can be met, but a little different. Each react to the batter as if he were a small child. Each request help or help him. The 3 together promise to keep us company until our mother arrives. They talk of building a new, utopic world, then tell us to go out and play. You can now enter a new area on the map, Mama. Hello, Mama. Papa left. I don't like him anyways. I hope you'll be back soon. I made 3 friends today. The tall mister told me that he'd take me to ride a pedalo, and that we'd all work together to build the world. The little bird told me that he'd show me the sky and the clouds, and that I wouldn't ever have to be scared again. The big mister told me he'd bake me some cake. Today was a good day. I would like you to come back soon. A fake new game screen and 3 new saves have us solving puzzles in each to serve the others. The calendar's date is March 18th. Today, Papa gave me a comic, but I want to go out and play. I hate this place. I'm sure Mom will pick me up. In this chapter, the batter reads a comic, Panic in Ballville, about Boxer fighting against Ballman. We take control of Boxer and play through a few fights. The batter remarks that this is really stupid. Today, Mom finally picked me up. Zachary shows up, commenting that the end is near, and reminds us to save, warning us that we're going to face the Queen. Biz Vincit, Que se Vincent in Victoria, translates to, "He conquers twice, who in the hour of conquest, conquers himself." From here, the dialogue is narrated as if in a novel. We meet the Queen, a faceless woman atop a platform. She tells the batter to return home. Upon learning of the Guardian's death, she asks, "Why have you destroyed the nation that I have rebuilt?" The batter tells her that she has failed her task. Her role was to take care of him. A notable mistranslation exists here in earlier English translations that instead read as, "I won't let you lay a finger on the son that we have brought into the world," which greatly changes the context of the scene. However, it is correctly the son that brought us into the world. We fight the Queen, or Veda Iloha, and her 3 add-ons, Delta, Sigma, and Ipsilon. That was very irresponsible on your part, Batter. I made a big cake for the party tonight. Would you like some coffee, my love? Queen of the Flies, it is time to join your disciples. Nothing went right. We must forget it all and dream sweet dreams now. Look, he has your eyes. However, his chauffeur. We finally meet the baby who's seen before. This is Hugo. The batter purifies Hugo, who does not fight back. I'm scared of the dark. From now on, there will be no more darkness. Finally, we reach the ending room and see before us a switch. But before we can take action, the judge appears and calls us a betrayer. Not only the batter, he turns to us too, and asks what we've done. We are asked to choose, batter or judge. The judge ending is the non-canon one, so let's cover it first. The judge states the choice was useless but the right one. We now fight the Batter as the judge, and the Batter now appears to us as some sort of monstrous creature. Your demented crusade ends here. Die, Batter, with the eternal souvenir of not having conducted your sad scheme to its unjust end. It's too late. Everything is lost. I know, but I prefer this over your victory. Nothing remains now, except for our regrets. It's already too late for the world, but the judge prefers this end. The world is pure and empty. If all the grand items are collected, you can trade them with Zachary for an Ares card, which allows you to view a joke ending about aliens in a war using the remains of the world for a robot factory. This ending is very clearly just a non-canon bonus secret, but I may as well mention it. It's probably a reference to the Silent Hill secret endings. Siding with the Batter, we fight and defeat the judge. The switch is flipped to off. Now, let's take a look at all of that and figure out what just happened in a literal sense, and then later we can look into the symbolism side of the story. Remember, most of this is just theory and can't be considered true canon. Anyone is free to interpret the events of the game however they like. First, let's talk about Hugo. Hugo is the young child we see sitting in the Red Room, and also the subject of all the chapters in the room. You may have realized already, but when the three Guardians were speaking to the Batter in the room, they were really speaking to Hugo. This was some sort of flashback, memory, or representation of such. Hugo, I would go so far to say, is the most important character in the whole story, because he made it. Hugo is the source from which the whole world of Off stems. The exact details here are unclear, and there's a couple ways we could read this. Option 1 is that the world of Off exists within Hugo's imagination entirely. Option 2 is that it is the real world after experiencing some sort of apocalyptic catastrophe, and Hugo has accessed some level of godlike creation power. Either way, here's Hugo's story. He was a sickly young child, stuck inside taking medicine, but wanting to go out more. His parents are either separated or in conflict with each other, but both care for him. His father tries to keep him safe and deal with his illness, but Hugo sees him as boring and simple. Hugo prefers his mother, but she's rarely around. At some point, his father left for a long time, and he waited for his mother to come and pick him up. In whatever form, whether dream or reality, Hugo creates the Batter and the Queen, based on his father and mother, though notably not his actual father and mother in the world of Off. Some sort of disaster has occurred. It seems to have stopped time based on Dedan's comments in the room, and the world is broken into pieces, the zones, separated by the nothingness, a non-area. But Hugo, along with the three Guardians, exists still in the world as it remains. The three promise to Hugo to build a utopic society, each with a slightly different but complementary ideal. The Queen became the ruler of this new world, and placed each of Hugo's three friends as rulers of each fragmented area. Pablo was also given the role of the judge. Valerie may have had a similar role. As of the Elsin, Mortis Ghost has stated that the Elsin are human, but affected by a strange and violent disease. They are potentially survivors of whatever event occurred along with the other characters. Dedan's zone gave everyone a job and role, having everyone actively participate to maintain harmony, so he built farms and mines, creating jobs. Jaffe's zone was for civilian living, and he built the library and amusement park for their enjoyment. Enoch's zone was designed to make sure everyone could always feel happiness and hope, so he developed sugar. But somewhere, something went wrong. Each utopian zone began to suffer problems. Dedan became all too strict, looking down on the Elsin, and became threatening and cruel whilst providing no real help to them. Japhet became mad and was consumed by Valerie. His subjects were terrified of the world they lived in. Zone 3 was kept separate from all this, but the sugar dependency led to the Elsin being completely consumed by their addiction to the point of violence, with Enoch not seeing or ignoring this, as they were still being productive. It's not clear exactly where the spectres come from, though they seem to have showed up in response to or in accordance with the steady decline of the zones. There's some implication that the Queen may have created the spectres, but it's not confirmed. They may have arisen because of the degradation, or they may have caused it in some way. If the Queen did create them, it may have been in response to the failures of the Guardians. Either way, the Batter emerged. It seems he perhaps didn't exist prior to the game's start, as he doesn't appear to know the things about the zones that he's being told. His entire purpose is to purify the world, though as we come to see, purification is more than just getting rid of the spectres in the zones. It's very interesting to me that the Batter calls the Guardian spectres too. Either way, his purified zones are empty and lifeless. It seems to be that purification itself doesn't kill the Elsin, but that the secretaries actively kill them off, suggested by the fact that the lone Elsin survived by hiding in a bunker. The Batter slowly works his way through these zones that are falling apart in terms of their society and inhabitants, and wipes them completely clean and empty, right to the top. That is certainly one of the most recurring themes in this game. The choice between living and suffering forever, or to wipe it all to nothingness in its entirety. A common theory applied to this game is the classic coma theory, i.e., that Hugo is a sick child in a coma, and the world and story of Off is a fiction that reflects his life and current state. It's a rare case of the application of this theory that actually makes sense, and isn't just done to be edgy. Firstly, notice how the visual style of the room differs greatly from the style of the rest of the game. It's much more detailed and realistic as opposed to the colour blocky zones. That's because it's a representation of the real world that Hugo has seen, whereas the rest of the game is vaguely constructed in his childish mind. It also makes some level of sense as to why the elements of Off are so nonsensical. Hugo is a very young kid, and a sickly one at that, who maybe hasn't been outside that much. He might not know that people don't breathe smoke, or that metal doesn't come from animals, but he knows they exist, come from somewhere, and are probably important enough to build an economy about. Even I, as a very young kid, used to think that smokestacks on the side of the road were deliberately producing the smoke. It also explains sugar as not only a massive part of the world, but as an addictive substance. To kids, it really is. Sugar high is the only high they know. An alternative take on sugar is that it represents medication that Hugo has to take for his illness. Hugo's real-world parents fought over what to do with regards to Hugo, and that is reflected in the ideals of the Batter and the Queen. The Queen continued to build and tried to fix the world with the Guardians, as his mother tried to keep pushing for a cure for Hugo, to keep him alive even in his suffering, as he might improve someday. The Batter fought for purification, for the end of the world that was, in his eyes, impure beyond repair, as his father had decided it was time to let Hugo go and free him from the constant pain he lived in. The switch flipping to off represents the father finally winning over the mother and turning off Hugo's life support, leaving the world as complete nothingness, but without the suffering and destruction that plagued it. Another theory takes the game at a more literal front. This is a world that exists after some great cataclysm that changed the very function of the world itself. Hugo is still a sickly child, but for some reason his influence has changed the world in certain ways, such as creating the Batter and Queen. Notably, Hugo has the highest competence in the game, clocking in at 9999. The stat allows you to use special abilities. This perhaps reflects Hugo's ability to affect the world in ways beyond the norm. He can even be interpreted as some sort of god in this world. Dedan refers to the world as being reborn from the still warm ashes, perhaps in a literal sense, the ashes of the destroyed world that once was. Whatever the apocalypse was, it was enough to fracture the world into distinct parts of reality within the nothingness, and perhaps change the very function of the elements of the world. Mortis Ghost also refers to Dedan as a mutant. This could also explain why the Elsin are suffering from a strange disease. Radiation sickness, perhaps? Looking at this theory makes the end a little more unclear. What ties the world to the switch we don't know, but either way, it seems that Batter's choice to turn the switch to off finally ends what's left of the world, leaving it all to nothingness. Now let's take a look at some of the characters of the game and what we can make of them. The Batter is described by the judge's eye as a purifactory incarnation, and despite his appearance has been confirmed by Mortis Ghost to be not human. He knows his purpose is to purify the zones, and knows that the player controls him towards that goal. He appears as a baseball player, and his competences all relate to baseball terms. The version of the Batter we see in the judge's ending, known as Bad Batter, has been stated by Mortis Ghost not to be a different form of the Batter, but instead a different perspective on him, as seen through the judge's eyes. Likewise, when we speak to Sugar, she references a big, frightening ducky, perhaps suggesting she sees the Batter in this way as well. Personality-wise, the Batter is reticent and stoic, rarely speaking. He is fully focused on his mission of purity and is very dogmatic. He seems to have a strange relationship with physicality. His reply, when being asked if he was a being of flesh and blood by the judge, he responds, "I think so." And Elson comments that he walks very quietly. The reason he looks like a baseball player can be answered with the comic in the room. We know Hugo created the Batter. It's interesting that he's given him the form of the villain in this comic. We know this comic was given to Hugo by his father. When reading the comic, Batter comments that it's really stupid, a rare kind of reaction from him. Perhaps the Batter doesn't see himself as the villain, as he is on his holy quest to purify the world. Notably, when we play through the comic, the hero boxer who we play as is on the left side of the screen, where enemies normally go, and Bowman, the villain, is on the right, where we usually see the Batter. Whilst we can't be sure of much about the Batter, we at least know he's a construct who fights to create purity within the world. Another character we can look at is the Queen. The Queen is a very interesting character. We don't see much of her, but she has a large reach over the whole of the story. It's never exactly clear what about her is fact or rumour. It may be true that she created the spectres, or she may not even know what's going on in the zones. Her name, Vader Eloha, is interesting. Vader is the Dutch word for father, and Eloha likely comes from a traditional title for God in Judaism, Eloah, making her name Father God. She's the only character to use add-ons aside from the Batter, which may indicate that she and the Batter are the only ones created by Hugo, or that they have some other unique connection. Mortis Ghost has stated that they're not married, but their actual relationship is left very unclear. Mortis Ghost also stated that a lot of what the Queen has said is gibberish, and that she contradicts herself. Earlier in the game, she was referred to as having 1,000 faces. Looking back at our theories, perhaps Hugo's mother was the type to say anything and act in any way to make Hugo happy, even lying. Another interesting character we haven't talked about much is Zachary. He seems fully aware of the fact that this is a game and constantly breaks the fourth wall. almost no other characters acknowledge the player, and none else directly call it a game and refer to the game's mechanics save the judge during the tutorial. There's a book in the Bismarck Library that tells a tale about a masked man who kills a Toad King, and the French version directly calls it Le Roi Crapaud et le Marchand, or the Toad King and the Merchant. Zachary wears a toad mask throughout the first portion of the game, and this book is almost certainly about him. What relevance this has is unclear. Notably, he's one of the few confirmed humans in the game, the others being the Elson, Sugar, and Enoch. It's interesting to me that Zachary seems to at least somewhat know where the game is going, and yet still helps the batter along the way. The last character I want to talk about in particular is the Judge. He appears to be the Guardian of Zone Zero, and possesses a card just like all the other Guardians do. Zone Zero is the only zone that doesn't become purified, although it likely does after the batter kills the Judge in the true ending. He's the only Zone Guardian then who doesn't appear at all in the room's flashbacks. Judge is also a title, as we find out that his real name is Pablo, but what exactly he's the judge of is not made apparent, although he is the one to judge the player at the end. There's not even much more we can infer about him, but he's certainly a very interesting character within the story. Well, this video has been a little disjointed, but I think it's very hard to talk about Off without being disjointed. As I said earlier, theories are just theories. If you want to interpret the game as literally as it presents itself, then you're very welcome to do so. However, I think Off is just one of those pieces of media where looking at things from a slightly skewed angle makes it just a little bit more interesting. Off, in my eyes, certainly deserves its place as one of the most well-known and well-loved games of the RPG Maker era. It's a unique and strange piece that stands out in its rarity of style. Do you have a different theory about Off's story? Share it in the comments if you'd like. I'd love to hear different perspectives. Thanks for watching today's Panopticon Theatre performance. What do you think? Did I miss anything? What do you want me to talk about next? Make sure to sub and join the audience if you want to see more.